You're actually on the replay. They'll hear everything from here forward. So
All right.
whatever you say can and will be held against you.
It always is. It always is.
Yeah. This is the universe. Whatever we think can will be held accountable for.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is sometimes difficult to see those thoughts. They happen so quickly.
Yeah. And sometimes we don't want to see them. I think that's the real deal.
Probably somewhere inside, yes, we don't want to see what is.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Guys, hell of a portal we just went through. I don't know how you feel about it. I think
Well,
we're on the other side of the middle of it anyway. I don't know if we're out of it.
yeah.
So, what part of the world are you in?
I'm in Portland, Oregon.
Oh, okay. I've been up there. We were up there 2019. We were up there for one night.
Oh, awesome. Where I can't remember where you're from.
I'm originally from Texas, but I live in Arkansas.
Oh, Arkansas.
Yeah. I've been
Wow.
over here right outside of Fort Smith. We still got about another 40
Whoops.
seconds. We're getting some people in here. We got 34 people in the house, but we've been getting suppressed more and more and more and more, so nobody gets notifications. So having said that, any of you, if you don't mind sharing this to one page, that'd be cool. If you don't mind.
How do I share it from here?
Uh,
Oh, do I just go onto Facebook onto your page and then share it from there?
Yeah, you could do that.
All right.
And I'll tag you on it when the show's over. I don't have my phone next to me.
All right, I can go and share it.
Shout out to Fiona Carthew. She's in the house. She ran.
That's the first time I've ever heard her name pronounced out loud.
Is it really?
Yeah, I mean, I know I've known her for years, like 3 years, but I've never actually heard it out loud. I just call her Fiona. Well, I don't even know if I call her that. I just say hi.
All right, so we're at the 2-minute mark, 2 minutes and 22 seconds to be exact. So I guess we're gonna kick it off. You got it? Did you share it?
No, I'm doing it right now.
All right, we got. Oh shit! I got the wrong title up, don't I? Damnation! Hang on, let me fix it. God dang! I hate when I do that. Let's see.
All right.
The Michael A-E-L. What's the last name?
It's Luman. Luman.
Luman. That's right. Yeah. Luman. Luman like human, but it's human. Luman.
Or like light, or like. I mean, at one point it was Lublinsky, so we've come a long way since then.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to go back and change the titles on all the pages. But that's okay. They'll figure it out, and I'll go back and change it after the show. So Michael Luman's in the house. Soul Speaks 5D. No, it's not a spirit walk. Sorry about that. I just did a spirit walk. Well, a spirit talk. I was standing at the garage because we got I don't know. I was out for like 10 hours, lucid dreaming like crazy last night, purging. And I woke up. I thought, man, what is all that noise outside? It sounded like there was an earth mover out there. I looked outside and there was about 3 inches of ice, snow and ice. I went out there and stepped on it. It was like a skating rink.
Yeah.
It's third time we've had white, which is a little bit above average where I live here, right outside of Fort Smith. So, Michael, our friend Fiona Carthew, that's her second time you ever heard her name pronounced. She set us up. She speaks highly of you. I don't know if you're familiar with the show, but it's just a conversation. It's not a typical Q&A.
Yeah.
You're welcome to ask questions as well, whatever you want to do. But yeah, I hear that you're a very strange person. So welcome to where all the strange people hang out.
Nice.
And, we have a big question on here we ask from time to time is, have you always been this weird, or did you have a wake-up experience?
Well, I mean, I've probably always been weird. I might not have realized how weird I was until I had a wake-up experience.
When was that?
All right. Well, you want the whole? I'll give you the quick version of the story.
Whatever you want to do, it's up to you.
So, I mean, I've always believed in possibilities. but I kind of come from a sports background, and I've always thought that anything was possible. But because of the way I interface with reality, it was really tough for me. I broke my kneecap my junior year in high school playing basketball. Sports was my life. I thought my life was over, and I made a poor choice to start drinking. Now, I mean, looking back, I understand, some of the reasons why, but in the moment, it was just I wanted to escape from the reality I was in.
Right.
But I've always been highly empathic. Like, I'm super sensitive, right? That was my way to escape from what I didn't realize was taking place. Right? But I spent 10 years addicted to drugs and alcohol, 2 years in prison. I've been clean for 21.
Wow.
At one time, I thought that was my huge life experience. Like in 2007, I wrote a book called 800 Meters about my addiction. Went on a 12,000-mile bicycle ride around the United States to promote my book and my nonprofit that I had started. Right? But my life, even though I was clean and sober, my life still, physically, I was still experiencing things. So I've had 7 right knee surgeries, 2 left knee surgeries, a broken ankle, 2 torn hamstrings. Like, all this stuff was happening, but I didn't quite grasp, why. Because the doctors wanted to just tell me, oh, well, it's because you play sports. You're putting yourself in a position to injure yourself. Right. But really, it was disharmony that was presenting itself as injuries. So in about 2010 or 11, I started to understand a little bit more, let's say, about energy, like frequencies, vibration. And my chiropractor had a thermal imaging machine. So he could show me, there were things that were going on that weren't necessarily, let's say, my knees.
Right.
I already started to practice with energy type stuff. Like, I would program patches with frequencies, and I would work with athletes on athletic performance by wearing these patches.
Now, what year was this though? Because
this was about 2012.
Okay, I got you.
Right?
Go figure that.
I really wasn't at that point. I really still wasn't willing to allow it to work for me as much as I was other people. Like, once I started to understand the frequencies and the vibration and the patches and stuff, like my mom, without a patch, she could do 1 push-up. With a patch, she could do 3. So I started to understand a little bit more about energy. But then my back got bad and my hips got bad. And so for about 2 years, I was just in pain, right? To the point to where I had an 8.5 millimeter protrusion in L4, L5 in my back. I had 1 surgery. I re-herniated the same disc 3 weeks later. I was going through a divorce. I found out that not only was my back bad, but I had torn labrums and bilateral impingements in both hips. So in this moment of feeling as if I was out of options, I went out of town about 3 hours. I hiked up to the Deschutes River. I put all my pain in a rock. I threw the rock in the river, and instantly I was able to heal. Right? But through that experience, like right in that moment, everything made sense. Like, all the stuff that didn't make sense up to that point, all of a sudden made sense. Right? But also in that moment where healing was instant for me, I found that I could focus my intention on others, and others have been able to heal instantly as well. But I also saw the shift in my perspective about everything that had happened up to that point, all of a sudden looked totally different too. So if one moment I saw all the things in my life that I wanted to change, the next moment I didn't want to change anything because it all of a sudden made sense. Right? Like, all the stuff that I thought was happening to me was actually happening for me. And it allowed me in that moment to have that great experience. Right? But then afterwards, the helping others allowed me to stay in that experience. But it still took me a few years after that to really understand kind of what had happened and what was possible. So right away, I went to seek validation from people that had had healing experiences or people that help people heal. But I kind of went back because my experience was instant, but all the people that I had talked to, let's say energy practitioners, right, they all have these systems and they operated in time. And right, so I was doing a lot of things, and to try and understand more about possibility. Like I could charge my cell phone in my hand, I could bend a spoon, I could put my hand by people's ears and they could hear their own personal song. But really all of that was more just getting me into that place to where now I just allow my experience to be enough for people to heal.
So, okay, hang on, because you said a lot.
I did say a lot.
So let's go back to when you went on the hike.
Yeah.
Obviously, you were hiking with intention, and you culminates when you get to the body of water. You pick up the rock, and you intend from the heart, from the will, from the soul, to put all of your pain, really,
Yeah.
and injuries and so on into this rock, and you throw it into the river.
Yeah.
From that point, everything changed. Was everything instantly removed? I would say probably yes, on an energetic level in that very moment with that stroke, with that throw.
Yeah.
And was it also the same physically, or did that come in time?
I think the physical shifted instantly.
Okay.
I think the next moment I had a change of heart, which made it permanent.
So did you have any physical remnants at all of the injuries and of the pain and
Well,
things that were going on?
the day before I tried to take my kids paddleboarding and I couldn't even stand up on a paddleboard.
Mm.
I hiked up, which we really couldn't call it hiking because like I was in pain. Like my pain level was a 10.
Mm.
Right? Like I lost 4 inches on my quad because my back was so bad. Like things were bad. Like it felt like I was getting kicked in the groin all day, every day. The next moment, I was walking normal.
Cool. Very
I
cool.
drove all the way back to Portland, and then I paddleboarded across the Columbia River as if I'd never been injured, and as if I was in perfect shape, which is even harder to grasp.
And that's a big river too. That's not like a little river.
It is a big river. It is a big river. But so the experience was so great that I knew without a doubt that it had shifted.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I was getting at. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's powerful. Then you talk about, we've had a lot of healers on here.
Yeah.
Over 3,200 episodes. So there's been quite a few remarkable stories, people that are turning around. I mean, I can think of 4 or 5 of them off the top of my head, turning around stuff instantly. The experiences they had, how that extrapolated into helping or healing or assisting or complementing the healing of so many other people, as that seems to be part of their purpose and your purpose. Yeah. But you said something on the way to this part of it. You talked about and alluded to the connection between what's occurred with you and still with you today, kind of a byproduct. You talked about a couple of things. One of them being you could bend a spoon. How do you associate that with, let's just say, intentional healing? Do you use the same process? How do you, I could see where somebody, I had chronic back pain for about 12 years. My healing has been much more graduated, not instantaneous so much, but there's a lot of emotion that must have gone into putting all of that shift into that rock. Do you do the same thing when you do something like bending a spoon? Do you put the same amount of emotion? Is the process the same? How does that work?
Well, then it probably was. Now it would probably be a little bit different. Like so let's say my cell phone, for example. I knew that all the energy from the battery wasn't going into the phone, right? Because I'd already understood that, EMR and EMF and all this radiation and stuff's just everywhere, right? But once I realized that energy was everywhere, that it wasn't, the phone was using it, but allowing some of it to leave and stuff. Then I was able to allow it to go back to the battery. And that's when the phone started to charge. But that process from the beginning to when the phone started charging was 4 hours.
So what did you do in those 4 hours?
I'm not 100% sure what I did in those 4 hours, but I think mostly what I did was let go of everything that told me that the phone had to charge by plugging it in.
Right.
And then anytime something came up other than that, I would go to something that I knew was possible. So nowadays, you don't even have to plug your phone in to charge. You can put it on a charging pad. Mm-hmm. Right. So I started breaking down those limiting beliefs, like it doesn't have to be plugged in. Right. It can be on a pad, so it can charge other ways than what we think.
Right.
And then knowing that, let's say I was programming crystals at the time. And if somebody was sensitive enough to energy, I could take a quartz crystal and get that to feel like blue kyanite or moldavite or anything, right? If I did it and I put it in somebody's hand, they would say, oh, wow, this feels like blue kyanite, or this feels like blue, or this feels like red. So I started to really detach from all the things that limited me. Mm-hmm. So the same thing with the phone. It took me a while to get into that place to where it then started to happen. Now, the spoon's a little bit different because after some of the other experiences I had, I started to realize that the spoon is only solid because I allow it to be solid. But I can also allow it to be other things other than solid if I can grasp that that's possible. Because it's not so much when the spoon's firm, it's when it starts to bend. But you have to be able to maintain that harmony or that space as the spoon becomes bent.
Yeah.
Because your mind wants to say this isn't possible.
Yeah. So, people talk about connecting to the morphic field. I mean, we had a discussion about this the other day. I think I gave an example, which was associated with my back problems, having a dependency or semi-dependency on naxiproxen.
Yeah.
So I started to merge with the naxiproxen.
Yeah.
As opposed to taking it. And that sounds like a similar kind of evolutionary experience like you're talking about, because it went from that to, as I was merging with it, understanding, okay, some of this, you don't need to be here. Like, some of it was unnecessary. Excuse me. And then from there, it was like, what plants did you come from? And what do you do? And then it went into the body, and the body was saying, this is the spinal. I remember this. This is the spinal fluid. This is what gets inflamed, and then it starts to pressure and so there was this whole evolution. I don't know if it was a 4-hour experience. I actually did it several times. Yeah. But having said that, it sounds like, ultimately what you're saying is, and just add to this or subtract to it, is that you were becoming one. Everything is the same thing. Everything is moving. You're communicating, communing, instructing, collaborating with an energy, let's say, that has a physical presence, or maybe that doesn't have a physical presence. Let's say in the case of like maybe at least not from the naked eye, like a virus or something. And you're collaborating, I guess, with the proper intention to manifest or birth transformational type of new energy or new form of energy, something like that. Could you add to that or pull anything away from it that you're not comfortable with?
Well, trying to think of what I want to say here. So much stuff happened in about a 6-month period that continued to allow that experience to be real. Like, even though, let's say the healing was instant, but there was still a lot of discovery that took place after that to allow that instant experience to stay firmly in this reality. Right? So whether I was becoming one or repairing my back in the moments before, I continued to stay healed by the things that I was doing.
Right.
Right? Like, I didn't just go charge my cell phone or bend a spoon, right? I started to interface a little bit differently, let's say energetically, and started opening my mind to possibility. And I actually started seeing things much differently.
Yeah.
Like, when I would, it's interesting because when I was a kid, I would have these experiences where everything looked like energy. Where I'd then go to my mom and say, I need to go to the eye doctor because my eyes are bad. But every time I went to the eye doctor said, there's nothing wrong with your eyes. Right after my healing experience, the crazy thing was that I could see like that again if I chose to. Right? So I started seeing the energy and everything, but I also became really in tune to stuff I'd shut down for years too. Like 3 or 4 days afterwards, there was somebody running down the road, and I could feel their heartbeat in my chest. Right? To where I knew it wasn't my heartbeat. And then I started to realize if I really wanted to, I could feel everybody's heartbeat that was running down the street. Right? Just once I started to understand that everything was energy, I could go into there was a bookstore in Portland, Renaissance bookstore, and I would go in there and I could put a book in my hand and they could quiz me what was in the book. And I could tell them just because I knew what was in the book. Right? Like, once I knew that everything was energy and information, like, I could get the information without reading the book. Right? Because that information was already there.
Right. Right. So yes. I that's what I thought. Like, I mean, you've made this a way of life.
Yes.
It's something you sustain and continue to nurture.
Yeah.
Now this is kind of like igniting in 2012, right? And then I know that more happened, and like you said,
Yeah.
it
It
further anchored
started in
itself.
20, but so even though I was able to help, let's say, athletes with performance, with making patches with frequencies, I really wasn't willing to allow it to work for me. Right? Because sometimes our story is greater than the stories of other people.
Yeah.
And being highly empathic, I really wanted other people to have great experiences. I really wasn't willing to have it for myself yet. But so, if looking back, all the things that happened were just a result of the way that I interfaced. Like, I injured my knee the first time, and then I held on to that disharmony so that the next year I injured my knee, and the next year I injured my knee. Right? It wasn't sports. It was just sports put me in a position that the disharmony presented itself as an injury. Right? If I was a pitcher in baseball, it might have been my elbow and not my knee. Right? But the rock just allowed me to let it go without the fear of it going back to other people. Because I had taken all of that on. Like, I became a mini savior, thinking I was doing good. Because deep down inside, I've always wanted to help people. But I really wasn't helping people up to that point, because I was just taking that and becoming physically worse myself.
Yeah. Wounded
But
healer.
eventually, I probably would have had fibromyalgia or something.
Yeah. Which
Right?
is interesting because it's common with what some people might call starseeds, light workers, empaths, super empaths,
Highly
fibromyalgia.
empathic women operating very sympathically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, you had a bit of a wounded healer thing happening, and then you started to, I guess, accept it and apply it to yourself more and more and more, which
Yeah.
then kind of carried over to the entire experience, more and more aspects of your life, the way you looked at everything and acknowledged the energy. and the way the energy moves and can move. Yeah. So, like, you mentioned that you were a practitioner, energy practitioner. You bring people into alignment, heal, whatever word we want to use. And I'm assuming you've been doing that for quite some time. I would imagine it's part
I've
of
been
your.
I've been doing it for the last, since about, since my experience. Yes, I've been doing that.
Okay. How about the sessions, like the evolution of the sessions since you started doing them?
Totally different now.
Yeah. Do you gain from these sessions in terms of a higher level of alignment? Does information come through in these sessions, and how have they changed over the years?
Yeah. So, like I said previously, in the beginning, I went out and sought validation for an experience that I had already had. I had a gentleman that I met with that was a highly sensitive and energy practitioner, right? And I started to adopt some of the things that he did to help people, thinking that that's what I needed to do to help people. So in the beginning, I did a lot of stuff with my hands. Like I'd put my one hand over their left hand and hand over their right hand, and I'd kind of move energy and do this stuff. And then I would start, like doing age stuff where I'd go back in time and clear things up in the past, thinking that if I cleared up the past, the present moment would shift. So the first woman that I had a major healing experience with, let's say, she couldn't lift her arms up above right about here. And it took me 15 minutes to get her to the place to where her arms started working. But really what was happening was the amplitude in the moment was increasing, so that all of a sudden the healing experience presented itself. Whereas now I know that that can just happen right now. And previously, where I would think that I needed to go back and clear all this stuff up or analyze people or feel what they were feeling, I no longer analyze people. I no longer need to feel what they're feeling. If you say your back hurts, that's enough for me. I just need to show you that your back doesn't need to hurt, because really, when your back's hurting, there is also a place where your back isn't hurting. Right? If you want to use the whole quantum, like all those possibilities are there. So you might say it's a 10. I know it's also a 0, and I'm just holding that 0 until you know that it's a 0 as well.
A lot of practitioners talk about opening themselves up, opening their field. I would say somewhere between vulnerability and transparency, from a metaphoric sense, right? I mean, like, and ask the client to do the same. And it sounds like through talking to them over the years that there's a place. I mean, obviously it's a spectrum, but there's a place. It may be up at a higher place. It might be a little bit lower, depending on how open both are. But there's a place where they meet. So almost like, for instance, let me just put it to you this way. Have you ever healed anybody that didn't want to be healed? Have you ever healed anybody or been part of a healing where they were shut down and it couldn't occur? Because talking to these practitioners over the years, it just seems like there is a field of potential or, revelation or whatever you want to call it, where they meet and then everything is shared like an emerging. And I really like what you say too. And you can counter that or whatever you want to, but the thing that I find very interesting about what you're saying, because I agree 100%, is that what you're basically saying is now you don't even need to know anything.
I don't necessarily want to know anything.
Like, I mean, I'm just saying you don't even have to be going to a session, because what's happening is you're carrying this frequency, being aware, nurturing it, and being conscious of it at all times. So you're basically walking around as a field with that frequency of alignment, that when anything comes into contact with it, or you come into contact with it, it begins to start a dance of, let's say, a higher alignment.
Yeah.
And that's what it sounds like. And to me, that feels like the anchoring in an individual in their way of what people might call 5D or New Earth or whatever. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and I don't even necessarily get that wrapped up. Like, I used to want to know everything. Like, I would want to know everything that was wrong so that I could fix everything with somebody. But I don't think there's anything wrong with people. I just think the experience that they're having isn't quite as great as the experience they can have. And if I can show them that it can shift a little bit, then I can show them that it can all shift.
Yeah.
So if you say, oh, my pain is a 10, all I need to do is show you that it's something other than a 10. And then I allow you to choose where you want to go with it. So even if it is an 11, that's a difference than what you thought it was. Most of the time, if somebody says my pain level's a 10, if I can show them a 7 or a 6, it'll go away. Every once in a while, the shift is so slight that you have to continue to point it out to somebody. If they're so locked in or firm in their, I don't know if I want to use the word belief, because it's different than, I mean, it's hard to use words to explain an experience that isn't as great as it can be. But as soon as I can show them it can be something other than that, that's when the miracle happens, or that's when the magic happens. Sometimes the more I know, the harder it becomes, because I start to get wrapped up in the story. So I had a woman who had been in a wheelchair for 11 years. She told me her legs hurt. I'd helped plenty of people with leg pain, so it wasn't that big of a deal. I didn't see her. I didn't know she was in a wheelchair. I just said, hey, relax for a second. 10 seconds later, I said, okay, how do you feel now? And she's like, and this was just through Messenger. It wasn't even on video. And I was doing 3 or 4 people at the same time, right? So I wasn't all wrapped up into it. I messaged her back 10 seconds later. I'm like, okay, what do you notice now? And she's like, OMG, 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 you're not going to believe this. I'm walking for the first time in 11 years.
Wow.
Right? Whereas had she said, I'm in a wheelchair, my next thing would have been, oh, how long have you been in a wheelchair? What's wrong with you? And if she would have said anything other than nothing, I would have started to think, oh, this isn't possible. Just like I have a friend who has muscular dystrophy. I met her when she was in a care facility. She couldn't do transfers. I could get it to where she could do transfers, and now she's home. I can't quite create enough amplitude for her to just get up and walk normal, because of all the things that she has told me about the experience and the way now that I view her experience, because it's just not her having to overcome that, because her dad had it, her brother had it, her daughter has it, her granddaughter has it. Like, if you want to talk like energy, like, it's heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And the amplitude that's created in that moment isn't quite enough to overcome all that heaviness. So the more I've done it, the more simple I try and make things. I want it to be as in the moment as possible. Just show somebody that it can be different than what you think it is. And they don't necessarily need to believe ahead of time or know ahead of time or any of that. But once they've had a greater experience, they have to know that they had that experience. Right? If somebody says, I can't walk up and down the stairs, that is the truth to them. If I know that they can, I hold that space until I show them that they can. When they get to the bottom, they have to know that they did it. Unfortunately, there's probably 20% of the people that will walk up and down the stairs and then sit back down and give you all the reasons why they can't walk up and down the stairs.
That's what I was gonna say. How many people, go from there and you know, perpetuate their health or expand their situation, and how many fall back into what got them there in the first place. But
Well, if the experience is great enough, they
yeah,
don't fall back.
yeah, if they have an experience, which again is like a microscopic example of what's happened over and over with so many of us over the last 12 years in so many ways, it obliterates or transforms. And I think we do have to use the term belief, because I don't know of a better one, but
Yeah.
you know, that belief goes away, which is sounds like part of the reason, whether it's conscious or not, that you don't want to know anything, because the more you hear, the more things that
Yeah.
pop up that don't need to be there, that obstruct, and you have to break them down in order to open that channel again. But I love the experience that you're describing, because it speaks to a lot of things. It speaks
Yeah.
to, there's so many people that are tuning in, that are been on the show, that are out in these communities and otherwise have had these revelations and epiphanies that also include skills and abilities, sacred wisdom, practices, high level frequency communications, visitations, and so on and so on and so on. Very strong episodes that create this type of transformation in a belief system, or the obliteration of a belief system into a newfound reality. But so it speaks to that. You've definitely experienced something like that in a very big way.
Yeah.
The service aspect that comes with it. You know, there always seems to be like a link to, okay, this is your experience. This is how you healed and transmuted and transformed. Now you're going to go out and cookie cut it with other people one way or another. It could come out a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
The other thing I think that happens, and I like to hear where you're at with this, is it's a hell of a jolt to what we call the ego. You know, it's a very powerful drug, and a lot of times we're unconscious, and rightfully so. I mean, this is some extraordinary things that have happened around the world in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And so, be it a visitation or an angel appears, or a situation such as yours, or high level intelligence coming in, it's a pretty big challenge to the ego. Did you have to deal with that? Did you have to decompress from time to time? Did you
Well,
have any challenges?
I mean, I think I have to do that all the time, because our perception of the past. So a moment ago when I was talking, like, if the experience in the moment is great enough, the past loses all its sting. Right? So this, using the stairs as an example. If you're sitting at the bottom of the stairs, and your experience up to that point is, I can't walk up and down the stairs. There's so many things attached to that story, right? Because when you're looking back, you're like, oh, well, this happened and this happened and this happened. And this time I tried to walk up and down the stairs and this is going on, right? And walking up the stairs, up and down the stairs, is not even a possibility. If that moment is great enough, the past shifts enough that it no longer holds any influence over the present moment.
So there's no more looping, no more programs showing up, even if
Well,
it's softer.
they become limited or less. So for me personally, I've had 7 right knee surgeries. Okay. The doctor told me never to run again. Right. So even after my healing experience, where my back and my hips healed instantly, about, what was it, 3 years ago, I decided to do a half marathon. I didn't really train. I just went out and did it. I was in the mindset, or the space, knowing that I could do whatever, regardless of training or any of that. As soon as I decided I wanted to run again, is when then the old defragmented stuff, let's say, started to show up a little bit more. So if I was a little bit sore and my knee hurt, all of a sudden the doctor saying don't run again was more real. And I wanted to run, which wanting to makes it a little bit different, because then it pulls up more of those past experiences. Whereas I didn't necessarily want to run. I just wanted to go show that I could run 13 miles without training. Right? Where then when I committed to running every day, that's when my knee, I had to kind of work through that old stuff. Right? And things sometimes feel familiar. And then we bring up the past, where like in the past, if my knee hurt, I would call the surgeon up and say, hey, it's time to go in and get this cleaned up again. So now if my knee hurts a little bit, sometimes that thought of, oh, well, maybe I need to just go get it cleaned up again comes back. So I do have to, with myself, get present enough to let that stuff go. But the easiest way for me to continue to heal myself is helping other people heal. Because for me, it takes me getting out of my head and into my heart to help somebody else. If I'm getting out of my head and into my heart, I'm actually helping myself at the same time. So me helping others helps me heal. Whereas if I'm sitting with myself, trying to heal myself, it's not all that effective. Because I know my history. Just like I said, I know all the stories. I know what the doctor said. I know that I've had 7 surgeries. I can see the scar. It becomes more real. Whereas if I'm focusing on your knee, I'm just getting out of my head and into my heart and knowing that that is great enough for your knee to feel better. And then guess what? My knee actually feels better doing that.
That's what I was going to. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Or ask. So when you say the best thing you can do is serve by healing other people, are you getting an equal degree of alignment with these scenarios?
I would say I'm getting more.
Okay.
Because there's so many different things that go into it, let's say, for me. Right? Like, had I not taken that miracle, let's say, and shared it with others, I could have gone back to being the same person that put me in that position in the first place. Right? Like, I had some experiences right away that allowed me to know that, wait, don't participate this way. So I had another woman who had a sty in her eye. And I wanted it out of her eye so bad that all of a sudden I had it in my eye. Right? Whereas there was a kid that lived next door that was autistic. I wanted him to be not autistic so bad that I, for 5 hours, sat there experiencing everything that he experiences. Right? It was miserable. Right? So I learned right away not to participate that way.
Yeah.
Right? So when I'm working or helping other people, I'm actually letting all that stuff go and practicing getting into that place.
Can you apply this seemingly physical alignment to the non-physical programming, unconscious programming, patterns, behaviors that we all have from the old paradigm?
Well, I would say yes, but also it's harder to point those shifts out to people. So if somebody comes to me and says, I'm feeling depressed, okay, it's hard to show somebody in that moment that they're not depressed, right? You might be able to point out, hey, you're smiling, or you're laughing, or you thought that was funny, or you can breathe easier, or there's a lightness, right? But sometimes it's not as tangible as the physical. And so I like to use the physical as a tangible way to show somebody that there was a shift.
Okay. So how about for yourself? I mean, did you discover, like many of us, unconscious behavior, unconscious programming along the way in this endless ending journey? Did you discover things in yourself and then apply the mechanics of this to the programming?
Yeah, I would say that, I mean, that's the daily challenge. I mean, that's what, I experience every day. I mean, there's a lot, like, I'm far from perfect.
I know. I can see you're very humble. I mean, I'm just trying to like dig
Yeah.
for
And I
more
still,
common, more common ground in terms of people being able to relate. You know what I mean? I
yeah,
mean, it's a lot like you're talking about with the difference between the programming and something that's painful in your body, because you have hard evidence that they're not going to disagree with, where the person that's depressed might
yeah,
not be able to see it. But like, for instance, do you get triggered? Do you use the mechanics of this process when you get triggered, or what do you do?
yeah,
How do you bring things into equilibrium that give you a fit? You know what I mean?
yeah. I would say, yeah. I mean, let's say with my kids, right? If my 13-year-old is probably more like me than I want to admit, right? Because everything that he does can trigger me, right? Like for him, school isn't really important. To me, school wasn't very important, right? It was sports and girls, right? But when he doesn't want to go to school, right, it is sometimes difficult for me to find that space and just allow him to be him.
A delinquent.
Right. Right. Even all the experiences I've had, like I can show him, right? But if I if I get angry or if I get wrapped up into his experience, then there's
Yeah.
two of us having a not that great experience.
Yeah.
So yes,
Yeah.
I practice holding space for my kids as if I was, helping them heal. But it's a lot more difficult for the people that are closest to us. I have an older sister that's rather unhealthy. It's hard for me to focus on her and hold that space long enough because the stories are so extreme. And the stories have been going on our entire life.
Yeah.
Right? So when she starts, if it was somebody else and they started, let's say, to share a story, I would say, um, yeah, I don't need, all of that is great. The past is this, but I don't need to know all of that. And
Right.
sometimes that limits me from holding that space for you. But when she starts to spew the story of why she's not feeling well, like I start to get like the story's real to me because I experienced a lot of the story with her growing up.
Mm.
Right. So it's really hard to hold that space enough so that the story can shift for her.
Cool.
Yeah. And, probably part of my personality or part of who I am has put me in a position to be this type of a influence or this type of an example, right? Like I don't have, I don't know if patience is the word, but like I like things to happen now, right? For me to sit and focus on you for an hour, I probably couldn't hold that space long enough for an hour, but I'm pretty good at hyper focusing for 5 seconds or 10
Mm-hmm.
seconds.
Mm-hmm.
But that's been my personal, like I'm ADHD or what they would call ADHD, right? I have a short attention span. I can get in my head and I can get, dreamy or whatever you want to call that space. But for 5 or 10 seconds, I can get into my heart and allow that to be enough for somebody to have a greater experience.
Makes sense. A lot of these people we might call starseeds, light workers, etc., seem to have ADHD.
Yeah.
ADHD, Asperger's,
Yeah. I mean,
autistic.
all of that stuff that they've put definitions to is just the way that we interface.
That's right. That's right. I had a family member that was diagnosed, mentally with mental affliction, schizophrenia
Yeah.
was one of them, and living in that environment or living interfacing with a person such as that, uh, and then some other life experiences, even my own, I began to understand that that's just the way they're built. There's nothing wrong with them at all. It's just they're seeing things we're not seeing, or
Right.
like you said about the seeing energy. We've had a lot of people come on here and talk about that when they were a kid.
Yeah.
seeing beings, apparitions, energy.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like they were precursors of the veil being lifted. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like we're all going to be in that space. Each one of us has some insight into it in one way or the other that maybe somebody else doesn't. And then through, devices and access points like you, we start to get to expose ourselves to it and pick up that code.
Yeah.
So like, so many different people come on here and I respect everybody's reality. There is no right or wrong answer. But I'm just curious, given your experience, have you had anything that's kind of occurred that you feel is related to your transformation and your awakening? And I'm talking about, like, say, divine essences, galactic, angelic, elemental, voices, anything, geometry, anything that seems to have been a part of it or correlated or paralleled it?
Well, I think all of it, really. I mean, just like I spent 10 years addicted to drugs and alcohol.
Hmm.
The last 8 years was meth.
Wow,
For
that's
whatever
heavy.
reason, I could not stop.
Now,
I mean,
was this before or after the
before,
2012? Before, okay.
before. So from 92 from 90 to 2000 when I went to prison,
Okay.
I was addicted to drugs. I could not stop. Right? But also, it was the thing that allowed me not to feel everything that I had felt up to that point. But I did always have this deeper understanding that it wasn't going to last forever.
Right.
And I'd been on the run from the police for 3 years. But when I got arrested the last time, I had a 30-second moment of clarity where I knew that that was going to be the last time. Like I just knew it. Right? But I got thrown into a jail cell that had 70 people in 20 beds. And then, it took me a year to get all my stuff taken care of before I finally got sentenced. Right. So I still had to go through the experiences for the decisions that I'd made. But I had this knowing that the struggle was going to be different than it was before that. And I've been clean for 21 years now. Right. So I've had moments of clarity like that. Like my healing experience, if I could explain what happened in that moment, it would be like 6 months of moments in one moment. I don't know if you've ever been in a car accident where everything just slows down.
Absolutely.
Right.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
Right. And because I've been in a car accident when that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Right. When everything is just like tick, tick, tick. That my experience, that healing experience was like that. All of a sudden I had clarity on things that I didn't before. But I also, when I was 3 days old, my mom had an experience that she said this baby is, or that a personage came into the room and said this baby is special. Right. So I've always had those type of things that have happened in my life. Like I've been shot at. I was kidnapped for 6 months. Like I'm supposed to be here for something.
Right.
Or I wouldn't be here anymore.
Right on. And so how many, you have kids in the house?
I do.
How many kids you have in the house? How old are they?
Well, I have 4 total. My oldest son is 22. I have a 15-year-old daughter, a 13-year-old son, and a 10-year-old son.
15, 13, and 10.
Yeah.
Holy Jesus.
Yeah. And I have my younger 2 boys with me like 90% of the time. So yes, they're always here.
So a lot of people have talked about this emergence of the energy or the frequencies or band of frequencies that these young people are bringing to the table. You talked about one of them not really getting into school, which you could relate to, which if you also look at some of the stories of these star seeds and light workers, and we know we're not stuck on labels, there's a lot of hellraisers. There's a lot of nonconformists.
Yeah.
So these kids may share that in common with them. But do you learn anything? Do you see anything? Are you finding anything out about yourself or about what's going on uh, collectively, energetically through your children?
I do some things, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what I learned the most with my kids is just allowing them the space to be what they need to be.
Yeah, that's what I learned. I had
Yeah.
6,
Yeah.
and when this all started in 2011, I spent a couple years homeless, and then got them back. Got the 2 youngest back, so they were 11 and 12 girls. And I love what you said earlier. I picked up on it. You just repeated it, but that was one of the big lessons, was allowing another soul to find out on their own. Basically, like you were saying, you can tell them something. Like even when you were talking about the amplification of the belief system, when you're working with somebody and acknowledging that that's what's going on, like you suppressing your kid from his uh, knowing that he doesn't align with school on a given day would just enhance it and make it bigger and bigger, but you just let it go, and then they travel like water, and they're going to end up where we all end up. But do they ever say anything? Like, I've heard people, and you're in a PowerPoint too, Portland, I would imagine. Do they ever like say things that shock you, that you're like, wow, like, where did that come from, or things they might know of, or the way they might see the world that just kind of seems like would be coming out of somebody that's much older?
Hold on one second. The 10-year-old, or the 9, almost 10-year-old, just came in the door.
Right?
That's my room.
Yeah.
Can I put my bike in?
No, just put it in the hall for right now.
What internet cord did you use mine?
No, I used Isaac's.
Okay.
Yeah. He was worried about the internet cord.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go play right now.
Okay. All
I
right.
thought he was going to come in and have a conversation with
Here,
us.
you want to come in and say hi real quick?
Oh, yes.
Okay, he'll come in and say hi. His name's
Cool.
Oakland.
What's his name?
Oakland, Len.
Oh, yeah. Oakland.
Say
That's
hi.
a cool name. I never heard of that name. Cool hair, too.
Okay.
Yeah,
He's a little shy.
I can tell.
Yeah.
Very beautiful kid. Beautiful kid.
Yeah.
Thank God he looks like his mother.
Yeah, that is true. He does
Okay.
actually. He does
I'm
look
just-
like his mom. Now
I'm
my
just messing.
13-year-old looks more like me.
Yeah. I'm just messing with you.
Yeah.
So how do you see everything that's going on? I mean, it's so fascinating, because like what you do is like a microcosm of what's going on. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so many people seeking external belief systems. And I think maybe it's part of our process. We go from a belief system that's this confining to one that's a little bit bigger to one that's a little bit bigger. So I'm not knocking anything, the process or anyone, but like, how do you, given your experience of the last 10, 20 years, whatever this has been happening, you got clean around 2000, you go on this journey, you're healing, and then your healing kind of skyrockets on about 2012, and then you're on the road. How do you see things? Like, how do you see things? What does it mean to you? What do you think is going to happen? Do you get affected by the global occurrences and things that are happening? How do you stay balanced in regard to that? Do you give it any thought at all?
Well, probably more than I would like. I mean, it's really tough with all the stuff that is going on not to get wrapped up in it. Right. But through my experiences, I learned right away not to get too wrapped up into it, because things do. I mean, all the stuff that's like all my injuries and stuff were because I got too wrapped up in things that were happening. If we just want to use like COVID, let's say, for an example, right? Like, I try not to get too wrapped up in it, because I know that I can overcome anything outside of me. Like, I'm greater than a virus or bacteria or whatever that is, right? But it's the same with negative people, right? There was a time when if there was a room of negative people, I would think I needed to protect myself from the negativity.
Right.
I'm starting to get to the point to where to really be an influence or an example for change, you have to walk into that room knowing that your positivity is enough, that if they choose to be greater than what they're being, they can. And not to worry about the negativity. But just like I said earlier, like I try not to read people, because then that's just my perception of what I think is wrong with them, when there's really nothing wrong with them. But they have the ability to be greater than what they're being. The only way to really hold that space is to be greater than what they're being. Right? So you can't walk into the room protecting yourself and then expect to be an example of what they could be. Because really deep down inside, somebody that's negative is really just protecting themselves from getting hurt.
Yeah. And somebody that's protecting themselves is just resistant to something the universe wants to show you.
Right. Yeah.
Such as, somebody does something, and I agree with you. I think we have a bubble. I call it the Forrest Gump bubble.
Yeah.
We have our own field. It's its own fortification. Our beliefs are paramount to the level of imperviousness that it has.
Yeah.
But if something does break through and make me uncomfortable, then I think a lot of us are all learning this is it's not about that person.
Yeah.
It's about me.
Right.
Not about me, like say, I do that, or maybe I do, but that there's some information there that you haven't looked at.
Yeah.
Do you run into that?
Oh yeah, quite a bit. Yeah. I mean, there will be times when it starts. I'll notice it more physically than anything else.
I would think you would. Yeah, I think you would notice it physically, which is beautiful because, like you said, it makes it easy.
Like if my back starts to hurt, I know enough now to know that it's not necessarily my back. But I'm allowing external things to remind me that my back has hurt in the past when external things were too much. Right. So then I know that I need to just practice letting all that stuff go.
A lot of people have talked about, and myself included, the amplification of the voice and presence of the consciousness of the body itself. Like, you can talk about spirit, soul, body, which a lot of the sacred texts would call the triad, Father, Son, Holy Ghost. There's a lot of different ways to say it, but obviously there's been a resurgence in the awareness of soul, and maybe you could even say spirit, without getting too deep. But the body's always been in a different category. Yeah. I'm a human. I'm small. I'm limited. And now stories are happening all over the world, such as yours, and people are starting to get to a certain point where this unification of these three things can merge and become one. And who knows? I mean, what happens? I mean, I don't know. But my point is, a lot of people have been talking about the last couple of years, the communication and communions that they're receiving and sharing with their body. What to eat, what not to do, what feels right, what doesn't feel right. Hey, I got a pain here, exposes a trauma. You have been very sensitive to your body. It sounds like, really, at least for the last 20 years. Have you seen an increase in that matter of like communication, understanding, the awareness of the consciousness of the body, the seat it has at the table of your multidimensionality?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. I've the last 2 or 3 years, I've really tried to do a lot of stuff to overcome like that. Like I've done a lot of fasting. In July, I did a 21-day water fast.
What was that like? What was that like? I don't want to get sidetracked. We'll go back to what you're saying, but
yeah,
let's pocket that one. I want to hear about that.
You want to hear? Well, first I did it. I've done a 7-day dry fast, no food, no water, and walked 100 miles.
Okay. You did the first thing you did was a 7-day dry fast.
Well, I kind of had to work myself up to that because for me, I come from an athletic background
Right.
where when I used to train, I used to be told that you need to eat every 2.5 hours.
Right.
Or anytime I wanted to lose weight or get a six pack or whatever, it was okay. Well, 6 small meals a day, 2,000 calories a day, burn more calories than you're taking in. Right? Or if I wanted to put on muscle, well, you better have 200 grams of protein or whatever that is. Like I was really, let's say, scientific in
Right.
that approach. But it also limited me from doing anything outside of that 2.5 hour time frame. And fasting was one thing that I could do to push that limit. But also fasting and working out were two totally opposite things as well. So I had to work myself into that place to know that I could walk. Like the first day I walked 20 miles, the next 5 days I walked 15 miles. Right? So 100 miles in that time. Right? But I had to know that what I thought before wasn't necessarily the case. That
So
nourishment wasn't food
right.
as
Right.
much as it was energetic or
Right. And or physical,
Yeah.
fat stored away or whatever. Yeah.
right. I could use my reserves,
But now this is the 5-day dry fast. Is that right?
or seven days.
I'm sorry, seven
Yeah.
day dry fast. How did I mean this? I find this fascinating, and I've actually researched this quite a bit, just through different podcasts and stuff.
Yeah.
There's a I won't get into it, but like, how did you go without water for 7 days on your first kick? I mean, there was no food, no water. Did you have
Well,
to?
because
And of course,
I
you
knew
did a
that-
lot of walking, which I think,
Yeah.
which I can relate to, not in the same way you did. I mean,
Yeah.
I walked about 8 to 10 miles on average a day. I was homeless. I didn't have any money, so there was a lot of fasting, which I didn't know.
Yeah.
I wasn't going, oh, I'm fasting. I was like, I'm hungry. I'm not going to think about it. I'm just going to connect and just walk, 100-degree weather, in Houston during the middle of the summer. And there was a transformation physically, which was amazing at 50 years old and having the chronic back problems and the atrophy, like you talked about, of the muscles. But so how did you prepare for the no water part? The no food part I can get. And how did it feel? Did you have weak moments? Did you have how did you spend your time? How did you keep your mind
I
off
had a lot of
water?
weak
Because
moments.
that to me would be the hard part.
Well, your body will make, I think, up to 1.5 liters of supplemental water a day.
Wow.
Which is probably actually better water than most of the water that we drink anyway.
Wow.
Right? So once I knew that the body actually can make water, like really the body can make whatever we need. Or we can get whatever we need from wherever we need it.
Now,
But
did you align with the what am I trying to say? The possibility or the reality that the body can make 1.5 liters of water. Did you align with that beforehand? I mean,
I understood that beforehand, but
Okay.
as I was in the experience, yes, I kept aligning with that.
Okay.
But I also knew that a chicken lays an egg but does not eat that much calcium. Like water is H2O, but really what is water? It's 2 H's and 1 O. And there's a lot of stuff out there that can make up H2O. There's a lot of H's and a lot of O's. I mean, the breatharian survives on the air, right? It's getting nourishment through the air, right? It's creating what it needs to sustain life. Like we're way more capable of things than we think.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I
And
agree.
when you're walking for 5 hours, it puts you in a pretty good headspace to start tapping into that stuff. Right? Like once all the other distractions and stuff kind of go away, it takes you 45 minutes or so to kind of get into that. If you've walked a lot,
I agree. I mean,
like running or cycling, like you get into that groove. But once you're there, that space is totally different than the space when you're not there.
Yeah.
But like things start to shift. You start to interface differently. Once you start to know what you're capable of, it makes those experiences a little bit easier. But
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that after you're done walking for 5.5 or 6 hours and your mouth's dry and the kids are doing something and everybody else is eating, right? You still have to maintain that harmony and know that you can overcome all of that and that you don't necessarily need that, right?
Yeah.
And I think at the end also too, there's the experience itself, but as the experience is winding down, you start to realize that there's gratitude that goes into everything,
Yeah.
right? If we had the same gratitude every day for drinking water that we had after 7 days of not drinking water, to have a cup of water sitting there, knowing that you can drink it, but having enough awareness in that moment to know that you can take a moment and be grateful that you're
Yeah.
going to drink water for the first time in 7 days. It's pretty powerful.
Yeah. Yes, that is powerful.
I mean, the same thing when I did a 21-day water fast. I mean, I renovate houses, and right, so I was working pretty much the whole time. But knowing that you are going to eat eventually is sometimes enough to provide the nourishment that you need, right? To overcome the challenges in the moment.
What'd you do after the 21st day? What did you do after the 21 times 24 hours? Did you eat
You
right
mean
away?
what did I do as far as food?
Yeah. What did
Well,
you eat?
I went a little slower than I did after the 7-day dry fast
I
because
would imagine, yeah, your stomach would just be like, I remember
Yeah.
coming off the streets and starting to be able to have some food, like a larger quantity, and how my stomach would just,
Yeah.
like my navel would just protrude, like painfully, because
Yeah.
your stomach gets so tight. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I had bone broth, and then I had vegetable broth, then I had bone broth, and then I had a few smoothies, and then I kind of
So you worked your way up.
yeah.
Yeah. Smart. Yeah.
But it also shifted my perspective a lot, right? Like, whereas before that, I might have craved certain things, where after that, the cravings were not there anymore.
So I'm just curious, like today, like, and I know again, there's no blanket uniform approach for everybody. Everybody's so different. I mean, there's people that are breatharians, fruitarians. I mean, everyone's got a different piece, I guess. But like, what's your routine now? I mean, well, for instance, what's your diet?
I mean, I try to eat as healthy as possible. I'd say I'm more keto than anything else. I try not to eat sugar. I'll eat a lot of green and organic stuff. But I'm still not as great at that as I am at other things, right? Because I love to eat.
Yeah, I still go for a cheeseburger every 10 days.
Well, I haven't had a cheeseburger, and I mean, I've had a burger problem. I haven't necessarily had a cheeseburger in a while, but
Yeah.
I'm not as like, if I would say, well, like, my diet is probably not as great as it could be. I could do a
Well,
much better job
yeah.
putting only great things,
Yeah.
in my mouth. There was
Well,
a time.
even like the energy of the thoughts in correlation with the food or the
Yeah.
drink or whatever. I mean, that's something that your story speaks to as well, and that people are coming into more in touch with as well. I think this is also one of the things that's been happening with the body. I mean, I started organic juicing. It's about 75% of my diet in July, and it's funny listening to you because certain things I can't do anymore that I absolutely loved. Like I loved eggs. At first I kept them away because I just didn't want to have them in the house. Then I'd have one every now and then, but it's something. And cheese is another one. Hot sauce is another one. I love hot sauce. There's just things that I'm just not able to do. And I have to say too, since I started juicing, I've never really had a problem drinking water,
Yeah.
but something's happened in my relationship with water
Yeah.
over the last few months. I mean, every morning it's a large glass of coconut water
Yeah.
or fresh water, and there is an acknowledgement, and then throughout the day. But I mean, it's like I'm totally tuned in with the water because I see the direct relationship it has with the level of hydration or dehydration that I have, which seems to be, something that's very prominent as these collective waves. You might call them the solar flares or solar energy or whatever you want to call it, photonic light that everyone's talking about that seems to be having some physical implications as well. Do you have any issues with hydration or dehydration? I mean, do you have anything you have to watch?
Well, I'm lucky. There's a spring about 30 minutes away,
Mm,
so I drink spring water that comes right out of the ground.
wow.
Right. Um, there was probably a time right after my healing experience where I thought I could do everything energetically. Like I didn't need to worry about what I drank because I could take tap water and make it. Because I did stuff with water with people, like we experimented, changing the water, and people noticed the difference when I focused on it, right? But I didn't think that necessarily I had to worry about what I ate either. I thought I could overcome all of that. I have found now that it's much easier to use my energy to do other things than to try and overcome poor eating habits or
Yeah.
poor water or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. So if I'm going to drink water, I might as well drink good spring water and then not necessarily have to worry about that.
Defluoriding it.
or whatever,
That's an interesting point, though. Yeah, because when I was homeless, and I've told this story a few times, I used to eat McDonald's dollar menu about 5 times a week. I had to, and even though I hadn't technically understood the things that we've all come across over the last few years, awakening, what's happening, whatever. I would speak to the food. I would speak to the dollar cheeseburgers and the parfait, and I would, because I knew. I mean, there was enough information out at that time. I mean, I knew this was a bunch of crap, but I would alchemize it, and I look back and I think, something was happening. No different than the water. Now, but you're right in terms of how much energy did that take. Not to mention, if I try to do it now, because there was a period of time where I would go back every 6 months once I got got back on my feet, where I would just go to McDonald's, have a couple dollar burgers, just to kind of re-experience ritualistic type of thing, sometimes reverence type of thing. I can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
It's like I can't. I would be better off eating 10 sheets of notebook paper.
Yeah.
But again, the energy expended, I never thought about it. What you're saying is to be practical, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think if we had enough gratitude for anything, we probably could overcome whatever. I mean, if you don't have any food and you think that you need something and the only thing that you can have is a McDonald's burger and you have enough gratitude to just be having something to eat, I think you could probably overcome a lot of the
absolutely
the negativity around it. But doing it long term becomes a lot of effort. And once we elevate ourselves, let's say past that point, or where our knowledge increases to a point to where then we know, like if we know that tap water isn't good, whether it is or isn't, I mean, I'm sure that it's not great, right? But I'm actually also sure that it's not great. So it would be detrimental to me to drink something that I'm already sure isn't that great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's there too. Like, and you'll get back to the belief systems and things, and the way this whole thing's set up. You might call it the matrix, or the matrix within the matrix. Just water. Take water, for example. And I'm just, using this in comparison, like your personal experience and the information that's coming through. We think we have to drink water. And not that we don't. I'm not saying that, but like if I get up in the morning or somebody gets up in the morning, uh, there's a water spigot in our sink that we're through comfort, through repetition, and through belief that we have to drink out of that. We can't find an alternative. There's a lot of programming in, like you were talking about, eating in sports. Even when you're not in sports, the narrative was you need to eat 3 times a day, 3 big meals and 2 snacks. Like this doesn't. We're finding out now this doesn't really jive as easily with the type of eating you do, or something where you might have 5 small meals a day or whatever the case is. I mean, there's so many belief systems wrapped up into our physical experience, including the body and the ramifications it has on the body, that are just actually suggestive programming, isn't it?
Well, I think it all kind of is, but that's really what we're all trying to overcome.
Yeah.
Is there's your information, then there's the information, and then there's the interchange of all that. Like if more people healed instantly, it would be much easier to heal instantly.
Yeah.
Right? The more we overcome those, just like a broken bone, as an example. If somebody says, hey, my arm is broken, it's x-rayed, I'm in a cast, it's been 3 weeks. And if I say, well, how long do you think it takes for the bone to heal? And if they say 6 weeks, right, I know that we've got 3 weeks to overcome. I know that it can be instant.
Yeah.
They've been told their whole life that a bone takes 6 weeks to heal.
Yeah.
Right? We have to, or in order for that experience to shift, right, the amplitude has to be great enough to overcome that 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Like I had an 18-year-old boy that was supposed to have surgery on his ankle the next Wednesday. He hurt it playing soccer. He tore some ligaments, and they were going to fix it, right? I focused on him. His ankle felt better. He went out and played soccer. To him, soccer was enough to overcome the visual of the MRI and the doctor telling me he needed to have surgery. So he didn't have a lot of interface with, let's say, the rest of reality on a bad ankle. Playing soccer to him was enough to loosen the grip of the program. Whereas somebody that's 60, that's been to the doctor a number of times, that might have hurt their ankle before, or that's broken a bone before, and it took 6 weeks to heal, there's just more levels or more layers of stuff to overcome.
Yeah. And
right?
just like
the same thing with food and water, it's all
programming. It's programming. You got a 16-year-old in that example and a 60-year-old. I mean, the 16-year-old, as you know, you've got kids. Even my youngest kids now, they're 20 and 21. They don't have the conditioning.
Yeah.
They don't have the conditioning they're that we've had. So be it a physical belief of, it's going to take this long to heal, or, whatever the case is. God, I was going to ask you one last thing. Let me see if I can pull it back out of the Akashic library here.
I'll say one other. I have found that there's an age from, let's say, 13 to 21 that is actually sometimes even more difficult than 70.
Really?
Definitely more difficult than 6 or 8, because the younger, yes, they're so much closer to that experience of wholeness or oneness or perfection or whatever you want to call that. And they haven't necessarily, their belief systems are set based off of, let's say, their parents. Whereas 13, 14, 15, they think that they know everything, but they really aren't attached to really anything.
Right.
So to show them a greater experience is sometimes difficult, because their greater experience is wishy-washy anyway. Whereas then, you get people that are, 21 to 50, that seems to be, let's say, a good spot to get people to show them a greater experience.
Yeah. What would you say what would you say? Let me formulate this. What would you say if you could sum it up in one word or maybe a few words? Is that which you represent and have experienced? This field, this bubble that you are, this conduit and transmitter that you are, that we are, such as the example of walking into a room of whatever, doesn't matter, that you're impervious. This is my etheric field. This is my soul, my spirit body, whatever. Well, if you could put, because so much of this, we're obviously, the human is the key factor. Like, it's on point, regardless of what people, it pull down or what they can do. There's something about being human 99% of the time in our consciousness. I know that's our multidimensionality is creeping in and reducing that number, we might say. But anyway, what at a human level, what would you tell people? How would you describe that which you've experienced, that which you are, the content of that bubble, of that field of fortification, where you don't have to seek protection because it is its own protection? How would you describe that?
How to describe it?
Is it love?
I would say unconditional love.
Unconditional love.
Yeah. If we could grasp that we're already perfected,
yeah,
like that's probably, when I run into people or come across people that, let's say, healing is difficult, right? That's the one thing that I'll continue to bring up. It's already happened. Like, we're already perfected. If you want to use the quantum model, all possibilities already exist in the quantum field. Like, we're all already healed. We just need to step into that greater experience.
Right.
And back to it, it's all unconditional love.
Yeah.
Like, this is all for our benefit, even when it's difficult.
I went to your page. I don't normally do that, but I knew your name wasn't spelled normal. So I went to check it, and I went down 3 or 4 posts, and I saw a meme that you had shared that I actually had shared myself as well to the Soulogy group. And I've seen it out there before, just different artistic versions of it, which is a true, and I don't have the words exact, but a true healer doesn't heal people. A true healer shows people basically how to heal themselves. Yeah. And to me, that's like a verbalization of what you're talking about and what we are, not what we can be, because we are. Yeah. There's just maybe some belief systems that are shrouding it. So my last question to you is, if, and I believe you, and I'm in alignment with you 100%, for the futile way we can try to describe it the best we can do, unconditional love, the transmission of unconditional love, inwardly and outwardly, in your experience, what is it that keeps any of us from impeding that transmission of unconditional love?
Well, I think anytime we do something that's against what unconditional love is, it impedes that greater experience. Like, we're examples regardless of if we want to be or not.
Right. We're all role models, right?
Right. Just like if we want to just use a tuning fork as an example, if this is 432 and this is 432 and this one's vibrating, this one gets to choose whether it wants to vibrate. Okay. This one's already chosen to be 432, so it will start to vibrate.
Yeah.
Right. But I've never been big on saying that I'm a healer. I'm an example of possibility. Right. I can also be a not very good example of possibility too. Because for whatever reason, I have a resonance that's able to overcome a lot of other people's things.
Right.
right? So I just have to make sure that I keep myself as close to that space as possible. And my life it's not like my life is easy, right? I've gone through a lot of stuff in my life. But for at least brief moments, I can let all of that go in order to help somebody have a greater experience.
Say it
But
again.
like, even
Say it
if
again.
even if
Maybe
my
let that.
day is not going very good,
Yes.
and if somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, I have a migraine," I can get out of all of that not good and allow them to have a greater experience.
Yeah. Because you go back to that place where whatever's going on with you is not ignored, but it's set over here, so you can go into this container, this, you know, whatever this is, whatever you want to describe it, and be that. And you know, it's amazing because, you know, obviously, you know, doing this show, a lot of people you'll hear, and I've experienced it, and you probably experienced it, like, oh, they can do that, I can't do that, you know. And there's almost like this inferiority, superiority. And I know we're made up of infinite frequencies, and some you might be in more alignment, and some I might, you know. But my point is that all of this is attainable. I think you know, what you're saying is, and really the great thing is you don't have to say anything.
Right.
Like you said at the very beginning, and sometimes it comes out in a poet's words,
Yeah.
or sometimes it comes out in somebody's, the way they cook something. You know, I mean, it's just basically kind of like it's our natural state that's been unnatural, and we're moving into a comfortableness, I guess, or being comfortable with our true nature. But yeah, it's a blessing to have you on here. I really appreciate you
Yeah.
spending an hour and a half with us. We'll have to do it again in 2022.
For sure.
We could talk.
Fiona says I should focus on your back.
I don't have back problems.
Yeah.
I don't have any back problems.
Well, you know what? Before we go, I mean, if there is anybody that's in this feed that has anything physical that they want me to focus on, I mean, I can focus on somebody. I can show you what it is that I do.
Well, I've got to get ready for another show.
Oh, you got to go. Okay.
Yeah, I got another show. We got Mary Rodwell in the house in 28 minutes. I got to do a few things before then. We could do that next time, though. No problem.
Or
we've done
if
it before.
Anybody can message me too on Facebook, and I'll spend some time with people if they'd like me to focus on them too.
Right on, right on. Very cool, and I appreciate that. Yeah, next time we do this, we'll have to do a little bit of that. That would be cool.
Awesome.
I just want to say, everybody, hey, this is a new brother, a new friend. We got to know him in typical Soulogy fashion, spontaneously. Thank you, Fiona. Thank you, Michael. And you know, we'll do it again. Thank you for coming in and sharing space with us and honoring us with your presence and being down to earth and real. And thank you for what you're doing for, you know, those around you and for humanity, because everything's felt. But yeah, I look forward to it again sometime later in the year.
Yeah, awesome. Me too. And somebody on here, I think it was Gilda or something, just message me and we'll focus on your hips.
There you go.
All right. It was great finally meeting you. Yeah. Thanks for having me on and spending time with me.
Absolutely. You guys take care. We'll be back in 25 minutes, Mary Rodwell.